Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
Welcome to this episode of BIMThoughts. Today we have a wonderful panel of women in BIM that we are so lucky to have coming from all over the world. Of course, we have our typical co-hosts, Bill and Carl. There are definitely some wonderful questions that we have lined up for you ladies. Do each of you kind of want to share maybe a short blurb? I know we have quite a few of us on here, maybe your name, where you're coming from, what your role is. Let's start with Melissa.
This is Melissa Thiessens. I am working with Parallax team, and I am based in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Awesome. Next, we have Rebecca.
Yeah, hi, my name's Rebecca Cicco. I'm the founder and director of Digital Node, and I'm based out of Adelaide, South Australia.
And Ava.
Ava Norton. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I work for Clark Construction in our virtual design and construction department.
Christina.
Hi, Christina Holden here. Not the OG Christina from podcasts of past, different Christina. I am.
Well, you are kind of an OG. You've been on here before.
Yeah, well, okay. I'll take OG number 2. I work for Hastings Architecture out of Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Happy to have you again. And last but of course not least, Mercedes.
Hi all, I'm Mercedes Carriquiry. I'm based in Montevideo, Uruguay. I work at ARCHSOURCING. I am co-founder and COO.
Awesome. Well, like I said, wonderful panel of ladies. Lucky to have all of you. So I guess maybe the first thing I would like to ask you ladies is how you came into your role in BIM, right? I find myself typically in a room full of men, right? So it's hard sometimes for us to find women in these types of roles, or what we refer to as the dark side sometimes. So how would you say that it's evolved into this role, into being primarily a BIM person?
Yeah, so, Christina here. I got my start in architecture. I graduated architecture school in 2006, and in my first job within the first year, we decided to test out Revit, and it was on a really big project. And so being the youngest person on the team, they were like, hey, you know technology, figure this stuff out. So I ended up kind of being BIM lead on the first project that we'd ever done. We had some training and hopped into that. And then of course, kind of by default, they were like, okay, now that you've done this, why don't you help the rest of the teams? And so I fell into it a little bit organically, but really discovered that I enjoyed it. And then, I think about 5 years ago, I moved completely from architecture into the BIM world.
Leadership. Yeah.
Yes, BIM leadership. So,
Ava, I feel like you have a really interesting story. Do you want to share that with me or us, the world of BIMThoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I started my career in architecture, and I was working for a mid-sized multi-residential housing firm. And at the time, they were thinking to implement Revit, and they elected me as one of 3 people to help to do that. So I started kind of my career in BIM in that way, although I had done some in school. And I was doing CA on one of the jobs that I was on, and I really loved the engagement that I had with the general contractor that I was working with at the time, and not really thinking about BIM as a role, but rather my interest in general contracting. I started shopping around for just a job with a general contractor, and they looked at my skills and put me in the research and development department. And at the time, Clark, although it was a larger GC in the United States, hadn't yet formed a department. And so I kind of became one of the people who helped to define that. So it's been kind of an incredible journey in the last 5 years, seeing it grow from kind of just a few people to what is now, over 50, depending on how you look at it with the training and permanent roles.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I feel like that's we find ourselves kind of in this evolution typically, right? I actually started really early. I took an internship my junior year at Virginia Tech and learned Revit. And when I got back to Virginia Tech, they made me the Revit girl. So by the time I graduated college, I was the Revit girl. So I actually have never even really fully worked on a project my own. I mean, I've worked on construction documents, but never really fully, which is an interesting kind of thing. I don't know AutoCAD.
That's crazy.
So Mercedes, tell us about how you evolved.
I so I chose a path into architecture because I really liked art, but I wasn't too courageous to go and dive into art alone. And I really liked, engineering and just like logical thinking. So I thought it was a good mix. It wasn't that great of a mix. So then I started working for the US in CAD mainly, and somebody mentioned Revit, and we did a project in Revit, and I completely fell in love with it. I have been ever since.
Yeah, because how could
So
you not fall in love with it, right?
yeah, I mean, it was with the logic and the alternative of doing things behind. So I remember building a 3D printer myself, and thinking how behind the AEC industry was in terms of how things come together and build things. So yeah, BIM was a revelation or something like that.
Rebecca, you also have a non-American, background. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your evolution?
I think it's similar. I think we're all kind of we all come from very similar backgrounds, and in terms of my journey, I think for me it started off very early when I was at university. I always found that there were kind of, I don't know, synergies between the way that technology could be used and the way that we designed buildings, basically. And I thought, what a great opportunity. And like some of the others, in the early stages of my career, I was always trying to push that boundary. And then when I moved to London, it was an eye opener. I was only like 25 years old, and I basically joined an architectural practice, and that's when there was an opportunity similar to the others to start to look at Revit as a BIM authoring tool. But in that time as well, I guess slightly different to what's happened in the US, is that the UK government were really quite innovative in the way that they were looking at policing technologies across some of the government departments. So I found that I was very much learning the technology, becoming, I guess, the expert in the office, and then also understanding how I could leverage almost the opportunities, I guess, that existed in the UK for BIM. And that's why I jumped out and thought, there's got to be some opportunities here. And I thought, what a great opportunity to start my own consultancy, not just to offer those technical services, Revit training and Navisworks and other things, but also to offer that kind of strategic training, because there was a development of BIM standards and BIM documentation that the entire industry was looking to adopt. So it was a really great opportunity for me being in the UK, and that's really where I found my feet in BIM, and obviously attending conferences around the world, connecting to people, founding the group Women in BIM, trying to obviously grow that group globally. It's been a great journey so far.
And I think last is Melissa. You're the only one that hasn't shared with us.
Well, mine is also very similar. I started out actually in high school. I started taking drafting classes, so I used those pointy sticks and actually did some hand drafting for a few years. And then we actually learned MicroStation in high school.
Oh goodness, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was bad. So when I went to community college, I learned AutoCAD and was like, oh, this is so much better. So it was even that much better when I got out into practice and got to start playing with Revit, a whole different exciting program to play with. So after I think it was the architectural technology at the community college, so I learned more about the actual programs and some construction stuff before I went up to the architecture school. And then got my degree and started working in I worked in just kind of a one-man shop for a few years, and then one of the bigger firms in Salt Lake before landing at the place I was for almost 15 years, which was kind of a mid-sized at the time. And at that point, since I knew so much about AutoCAD and things, I ended up being the go-to person for CAD questions and taking on all of the dynamic blocks and things. And so at the point that they decided to start actually looking at Revit, I was kind of the obvious choice to send to some of the training. So I did some training, and from there helped bring the whole office into Revit, and then stayed in that role training and, updating standards and things.
Well, and I think that's a really interesting thing that you bring up, right? Because I find women are typically teachers, right? Not to say that I'm not going to try to be sexist in any way, right? But I think traditionally, especially when we think about long time ago, the schoolhouse days, it was the women teachers. And I think that it kind of comes kind of naturally to teach as a mother, as a female figure, right? And I feel like a lot of the time in my role, that's what I'm doing, is I'm teaching people how to click and, whatever it might be. So do you ladies feel that that's, being kind of a teacher is maybe how you found yourself into this role, that it's, you just kind of naturally progressed into being that person that kind of showed people along the way?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. For me, especially just, I mean, that's a lot of what I do now. And I think it's, of course, not every woman is a great teacher, but I feel like probably all of us on this call, that's something that we're really good at. You have to have a certain amount of patience. And it's almost like I also think that teaching is a great way to learn things yourself. So a lot of times when I was learning something, if I had to turn it around and teach it to someone, you're thinking about it a little bit differently. And for me, I think that, being able to teach and learn in those early couple years really helped me learn Revit in a different way.
I'll jump in quickly and add to that. I think there's a couple of streams that bring us together in BIM. The first is obviously our passion for technology, and the second is our passion for sharing, those ideas. And I think that that's where the whole educational piece comes in, where we're actually so passionate about the technology and we want to share our ideas and share what we know, that it automatically blends into the learning. I don't think that's just women. I think it's all of us really in BIM. I know a lot of people in the BIM space that, that are really very much like that. We're all running around the world presenting at conferences and wanting to share our ideas. And certainly what I've found is that women don't put themselves forward enough for these sorts of opportunities, and that's one of the pieces of data that I've been looking at from the Women in BIM initiative, is why we're not as, it's not confidence. I think it's more why we don't push ourselves in the same ways. We almost hold back slightly, but again, that's a separate conversation. But certainly the learning piece and the sharing of knowledge is a big part of what we do.
And part of what I think is, part of the best part of technology in AEC, right? I mean, you see all the forums out there, you see everybody sharing at the conferences, people sharing their scripts, all the workflows, I think that's the beauty of it.
So I think one of the things that we've learned just from listening to all of your introductions to how you found yourself into BIM and the AEC industry is it sounds like you all took the technology route. Are we able to sort of pontificate that technology helps to kind of level the playing field, if we will?
I would say in my experience, absolutely. I actually went to school and majored in interior design and came out of school in an interior design role. And it was actually the architects who actually kind of, ruled me in and had me, doing the BIM things for them and helping them along the way, because they were okay with me teaching them and, wanting to, once again, like you said, kind of even the playing field, and they weren't necessarily concerned about me being a woman. I've never really felt like I had a different role maybe than a male, but it's hard to see it from my, being a female, right? Would you guys say that do you think that your role has differed from that of a male, or that in the evolution into your role that being a male would have changed it in a significant way?
I think that, I mean, Carl brings up a good point that like even leveling the playing field, because at least what I've experienced is similar to like draftspeople. Technology was newer or is newer depending on, you know, what size firm you're in, and it's not viewed as a skill set that it's kind of a tool, right? So when you advance in it, because other people are using it to help do something else, which is make decisions about either design or how to build something, they're not necessarily thinking competitively about the people who are excelling in that technology. So I would say that I haven't observed a difference, but perhaps it's because for a period of time it wasn't a competitive role. And I think that's changing, at least from what I've observed, that those roles are more desired and are becoming more competitive, and perhaps we may see that change, but that's kind of what I've observed.
It probably helps a lot that it's kind of a new role in general, because we weren't fighting against well, it's always been some old white guy that does this thing. It was we need new people that are excited to try these new technologies and kind of take the reins. And it wasn't something that somebody that's been in the field for 30 plus years was doing, not that they can't do. So yeah, we didn't kind of have to fight against how it's always been for this, because it is so new.
Yeah, for me, it definitely was a start from scratch in some sense. So I was like 5 years or so working as a project manager, so no tech related in Uruguay, and France. And when I started working on BIM and technology in general, I started working from the US. So it was a starting from scratch. And there is a lot of information today on BIM, and everybody shares its scripts and thoughts and stuff, but there wasn't that much at that time. So I guess I agree somehow with Melissa on it's not a gender bias or, I mean, profession, because it's pretty new still. I mean, it's even being defined right now.
I mean, I kind of feel like our numbers maybe follow the profession. What was it? I think Autodesk gave a stat at AU last year that it was maybe 20% women. I don't know what, you know, the field of AEC is right now, but I mean, if you include, you know, contractors and engineers, I would say, you know, there's probably less women in those fields. I'd be curious to see if those numbers kind of align, if we're, or if it's greater. Like, are there more women in BIM than, you know, percentage wise in these types of roles than in the rest of the industry?
From what we've from the work that we've been doing in terms of gathering data for women in BIM all over the world, really what it suggests is that the numbers are still, they're kind of comparative to the numbers of women in construction, but then they drop even lower. So I guess the reasoning for me and the passion I have for promoting, I guess, and encouraging and pushing women in BIM related roles is that for me, BIM is very much, you know, one of the key drivers for the future of our industry. You know, there are many others. We talk about the way that technology can influence us, but it's not just about BIM. I think there's so many other technologies that are starting to impact the way we design, build, and, you know, operate our buildings and assets, that, you know, the technology is only, you know, it's only continually evolving. And I think, I don't know, I think women in general, you know, the ones that are involved in the BIM space are still, the numbers are still low. And I think, I mean, from the research I've done, the numbers are still low. Women are still being paid less in the same roles, and women are still not, I guess, not promoted the way they should be across businesses globally. And again, you know, that's a real passion of mine, because I just think it's ridiculous. So, you know, and to be fair, I think I think it was Bill that asked the question that the reason that you stay in those roles and the reason why you're passionate about moving into a BIM role or the technology. For me, I wouldn't be able to work for an organization in that space purely because I felt that the only time I noticed the dilemma, I guess, for being a woman in construction was when I reached senior positions, because when I was kind of middle management or below, it was fine. It wasn't until I started to dominate, some of those roles and act as a leader, I found there were issues. And that's why I started my own business. So I guess I'd like to hear from others if they felt the same way and can relate, because it's something that I felt really strongly about.
So when I'm asked about gender difference and stuff, I have the feel that I didn't get to that level where Rebecca mentioned, because I didn't get to be on a high, very very high position or leadership, maybe just like PM or something like that. And I was pretty young, so I thought that back then, when I was on the table and there were 10 males and myself, I was like 22 or 23 or 26, I don't know. But it was weird that I was that young, not that I was a woman. But then when I look back right now, I think the reason for which I started my own company is because I saw back then, maybe I didn't realize it back then, that I was bounded. Not, I mean, definitely. And seeing it from a perspective right now, uh, I do feel that my unconscious somehow knew. So that's the reason why I created my own company and start challenging or just like cracking some things that I thought weren't right. And that's not only in terms of BIM problem solving or coding problem solving, but in terms of organization and team management and many things that maybe back then I did not realize that well, and they weren't that clear or important for me. But now looking in perspective, yes, and I'm happy to be like, I don't know, putting whatever I can to change that somehow, like from Uruguay, miles away. But yeah, everything counts.
That's super interesting that despite being in different continents, your experiences are so extremely similar, right? Like just from the experience that you had, the evolution you had, and then whether conscious or unconscious, then beginning your own firm to kind of deal with those issues and resolve those issues in your own right.
Sorry, just a quick note. It's funny you say that, because I found that from moving from the UK, from Australia to the UK, then the UK back to Australia. I never worked in the US, but I thought, oh, things are great here. It's fine here in Australia. I moved to the UK and I thought, actually, shit, it's not. Excuse my language. It's not actually that. It's not actually that. It's not actually that good. And it was, the same issues everywhere. It's a global dilemma, I think.
Melissa, how would you say in Salt Lake would you your experience in that respect?
I have to say I'm actually pretty surprised. In Salt Lake, working with job teams here, you'll end up in a team meeting and the structural engineer is a woman and the rep from the contractor is a woman, and we've got some mechanical engineers. And from a place that is, fairly conservative, I guess, in the, big families and mothers staying home and taking care of everything, it's been really cool to see how many both young women and women that have gone on to school and, kind of gotten into things a little bit later and are coming back in. So that's really cool to see here.
Christina, in Tennessee, similar?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back to when I first started at this firm. It was 2006, so almost 15, it's 14 years ago. We were 25 people. I was most certainly the youngest person, but we had a lot fewer women. And as we've grown over the years, I actually think in the office now we have more women than men. And out of kind of I want to say the leadership positions, it's close to a third of the leadership positions are women. So I feel like we're doing better. Each year we're promoting women. We have team leaders that are women. We have associates, senior associates, associate principals that are women. So we're growing those numbers. But I feel like, we've been kind of growing at the same pace that the rest of the industry has been growing. We noticed and we kind of all spoke up and said, we need women in leadership in this office. We want to be a good example to the other women that are coming in behind us, and we want to be able to lead and mentor those people. So it took us speaking up, but then, and I'm curious if this is also the case with you guys, and this may be a question that you want to address later, but I feel like a lot of times a lot of women in that I've talked to, at least here in the South, we feel like we have to kind of overdo our job a little bit to even get noticed, while the men are doing kind of just the bare minimum, or just they're doing their job, and then we're doing our job plus joining all these organizations and doing all those other things to show that we are leadership material, rather than just showing up and doing a great job. So I think some of that, I definitely see that still happening, where women feel like they have to push a little bit harder to get noticed and be put into kind of that leadership role.
Ava, how would you say your experience in DC, and you're from, is it from your North Carolina or Tennessee? I know you're from one of the.
I'm from Tennessee, and I
Okay.
was checking out Christina. I went to UT as well.
Oh my
We are.
goodness, we're making friends.
Rocky Top.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm in construction, so I think that goes without saying that the numbers are skewed towards being, male dominated. But I can say even in my architecture experience, I have many cases where I was the only woman in the room. I know that, the company that I work for is, has recognized the lack of leadership and is working on that, but I think we definitely have a ways to go. But yeah, being in construction, you definitely see probably the more extreme side of numbers.
I feel like you're one of the hardest working people I know, Ava. You're currently working on your master's degree currently, correct?
Yeah, I have class at 7, so if this goes long and I'm not saying goodbye, that's where I'm going.
So in 20 minutes, if we go that long, Ava's leaving us. All right. So would you say that you also have maybe had to strive for more, or work harder than your male competitors or counterparts, if you will?
I don't. That's kind of working hard and a lot is kind of in me. I don't, and maybe it's subconscious. I don't know that I made a conscious or a conscious effort because I thought that I needed to. Um, yeah, that's a tough question to answer. I don't know if, like, I definitely work hard, but I don't know that it's because I feel like I have to be recognized in, equal to my male counterparts.
I would say that I have probably the same experience as Ava, though I probably can't say that I work as hard as Ava. I also have not felt like I've needed to work harder or strive for more, but also I just kind of naturally do. And maybe that's because I was raised by a feminist and she was a really strong voice in my youth. But I've never felt like I have had a lesser salary or a lesser of a leadership role. I've been advanced in my positions extremely quickly. I've never felt like it's been a sexist situation. In fact, it's hard and kind of sad for me to say that the seniority staff that are women are probably harder on me than males. And I don't know whether that's because they've had to work really hard to get where they are and they realize that, and they want me to work hard as well. But if anything, if I do experience any sexism, it's actually from women. Does anybody? I feel so strange and kind of sad saying that, but has anybody else experienced that?
I know what you're talking about too.
Melissa, do you?
Yeah.
What I was going to say was, I think there's, I was just going to say, I think there's there's two streams, I guess, I want to go into. I think the first is what you discussed. I guess the first point you made was the way you were brought up and your influences, and I think that certainly shapes who we are as people, regardless of, if you're a male or a female. And I think you're so lucky to have experienced, a mother, a feminist mother. I mean, I excuse me, I came from a very traditional Italian background where women didn't get involved in construction, and excuse me, and that's something that I was really that really drove me. But my father was a great advocate. He was always in construction. He always said, that you should always go for what you need to do and enjoy it. But I guess one of the things I want to touch on is what you said as well with the sexism. I think it depends really on who you are and what you're doing. I think there's so many different types of people in the world that I don't think you can generalize and say that all of us feel the same way, because certainly we don't. I think one of the things that I felt was important for women in BIM was to have a voice for those, and to have a place for those women who weren't necessarily as confident as some of the others, weren't necessarily going to put themselves forward, weren't necessarily getting the support from their peers, etc. Because I've had so many women say to me, "What's that about? What's the point in you creating that group? What does that achieve? And similar to what you've said, where women are giving you a hard time about, you being a leader. But I guess the rebuttal and the way that I explain it is that for me, it's not about me personally. It's about other women, other people that are in the industry that are looking for, I guess, an environment where they can openly share ideas and openly connect without feeling like they're being judged. Because unfortunately, that's what happens. In construction, you have to overdo it to prove your worth. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the business. What were you going to say, Melissa? You were going to add something, I think.
Oh, no, I've encountered a few like that you do get the feeling that they had it really rough. And yeah, I think the one that's coming to mind, I think it came from a place of, just wanting to make sure that I succeeded, but it did definitely come across as like just way more expectations than any of my male coworkers.
And I kind of got that from my mom too. She was tougher on me than my brothers. She expected more from me. She wanted me to make better grades. I guess because she knew that I was going to have it harder in some way. Or she expected it, that I would have it harder in some way.
One thing that I've, and this is less about, excuse me, or in like a position to mentor or perhaps harder, but one thing that I've noticed is just like there's not enough women who are older to be mentors, because when there are more women coming into the industry, if that ratio is higher than women who are in a position to mentor, there's just not enough. And I found myself maybe disappointed at like a few people, either in my company or in my previous work that didn't. I felt like, okay, maybe this person can mentor me or have some sort of relationship. And that branch, there was never an olive branch. And so it's kind of like some disappointment, but not to the same degree that like we're speaking about, like any sort of harshness or anything, but just kind of like just lack of presence.
Yeah, Ava, I'm totally in agreement with you on that. When I started in architecture, Nashville, there were a lot of men in Nashville, and there were very few women in leadership positions. And it was almost like I had to go, I was going outside of my firm to talk to women in leadership positions, which was great because it meant that I was meeting people. But yeah, it was difficult, and it wasn't. And I think you were saying, nobody really extended an olive branch. I think sometimes it's just people don't realize that's an opportunity, and maybe they're just kind of heads down, get the work done, like be a hard worker, do my job and go home. And I think it's great to bring that up, and we should be reaching out and helping those entering, the AEC community.
Definitely on board with that. And so do you guys feel that you've had resources or mentors that have helped you along the way? I know, Rebecca, you have the Women in BIM. What have you seen in terms of the types of mentor relationships or, personal mentors that you guys have had?
So mentorship is something not that common in Uruguay, and for me, it's game changer, life changer. My parents are both doctors, and they worked very hard but very equally. So I think that was an amazing example that I got when I was raised. Like my mother was she did nuclear medicine, so it's completely crazy back then. So I think they raised me with the idea of you have to do what you want and what you like, but you have to do it right and the best way you can and enjoy it. And I guess I'm really lucky to enjoy working and working really hard. So I mean that, and regarding mentorship, so as I said, in Uruguay it's not that common to have mentors, um, and I think it eases the path so much, and it can be done even by people that are not exactly in your industry, because it's just like having another pair of eyes to see and help you see things that are not being seen. So that's something I would love to to do for other people in order to help them get where they want easier and I don't know, yeah, with more confidence. I think it helps a lot to build up confidence as well, and it helps a lot to kind of show. I don't feel I had to work harder, but I do feel that I had to do like an internal process of showing what you're doing, just being on LinkedIn, being on Twitter, or just like sharing what you do, just like build up your confidence and share what you do because it's worth it. So I don't think it's working more, but showing more and just like get that space.
I think mentoring is a really, really, really important area to talk about, because we've just launched as Women in BIM, and one of our core team in the UK has been instrumental in that project, the Women in BIM mentoring scheme, where one of the things mentioned, is the lack of female leadership in construction and BIM related roles, and that's still a big issue. And one of the key, I guess, work streams that I focus on is ensuring that we draw attention and highlight women in leadership positions. And there's a couple of projects that we've got in place. The first, as you mentioned, the mentoring, where we have, we had an application for mentors, and we had quite a high number globally. We had about 50 or 60 male and female mentors apply, and then we had about double that number for mentees globally. And we've made significant progress in that project, where we've matched mentors and mentees, because it's not just having somebody in leadership to give you advice. It's having somebody that I guess can give you that advice being the right fit for you, as a mentor, and you being the mentee. And I think mentoring is very, very important. Is a very, very important part of that. It's something that, again, we've been wanting to do for years, and we've just got off the ground with it in the last few months. And certainly we're looking at potentially growing the mentor initiative in the next few years. But the other thing, just quickly, is that we, that there was a project that we called, I think it was top 10 or top 20, and I can't remember the exact numbers we were looking at, but it's gone quiet due to COVID. But we're looking at kind of igniting that project, where my idea is we bring together 10 to 15 women in leadership across the world to talk about just these things. It could be a podcast, it could be on a stage at AU, it could be anywhere really, but women in leadership in BIM specifically are so low. So we want to bring those women together, talk about some of our kind of global projects, and then highlight them as role models, obviously, to then draw in and attract more women or young women into industry, because that's really where where the initiative began.
I know it in my role, it's whenever I find someone that's interested in just being in the BIM side, I am ecstatic, right? I am like, oh my gosh, I want to be your best friend. You like Revit, I like Revit, let's hang out. like I am like the first person, especially when I have a new hire, that just I want to take them under my wing. So definitely I'm going to tell our audience, check out Women BIM. Rebecca, it sounds like you have set up some amazing resources. Does anybody else any of you ladies have some resources or maybe some information about how women in, whether it's in BIM or in AEC, can advance and get resources, make those leadership roles?
I would say, here in Middle Tennessee, the Middle Tennessee AIA has a Women in AEC. I don't remember what the name of it is called. It's terrible that I can't remember this, but it's a Women in AEC or Women in Architecture. And so I would encourage you to look at your local, whether that's the AIA for architects or your, local, engineering groups, and if they don't have one, inquire about starting one.
Yeah, that would be great on the resume.
I think local groups are a great resource. Yeah. Yeah. Could you imagine you founded, your local Women in BIM group or your local Women in Plumbing Engineering
We're very
group?
close to Equity by Design in San Francisco. So events are the best, and it's about more broad equity. And then with local Uruguayan promoters.
I think it's just connecting with each other, isn't it? It's making those connections. I mean, some of the ladies I've already connected with today on LinkedIn, so it's wonderful just to have an outlet or a place where we can make those connections, and that's why I started the group. It was to see if we could bring together people in their different regions of the world to be able to have, I guess, support, mentoring, even just to have a chat about, if something's not working on a project or whatever, but just to have that resource there. And I'd encourage, those that are listening to the podcast to certainly have a look at the website and register as a member, because we're starting to grow what we can do, I guess, with membership and linking people all over the world for women in BIM. So something that I'm really passionate about.
And we will definitely post that in the comments and make sure that we have that resource for our listeners. Absolutely. Bill, Carl, any final thoughts?
Sure. I always have final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't shared any thoughts. That's rare.
I have been just absorbing all of this.
Usually it's hard to get a word in.
Usually it is. But I've been thinking about BIMThoughts and about how BIMThoughts has always had a woman co-host. Have you noticed that?
Well, actually, I haven't until I just thought about it.
Right. We have always had a woman co-host on BIMThoughts because we want to be equal. No. And I don't know if that happened on purpose or if it just happened that way.
Well, you know what? I think you're just awesome, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just seeking out people who wanted to be on the podcast and co-hosts who knew about BIM and were the experts in their fields. But this is all we've always had experts on, and this is just fantastic. But what I would like to do is offer BIMThoughts as a platform for anyone who would like, or any women in BIM, or any minority or any person that wants to share their knowledge and share their thoughts about BIM and technology.
Wonderful platform to do so.
If you'd like to do that, let me know, and we will see about getting you on and talk more about all this great stuff. I think we should have an episode just on mentors.
Yeah, great.
And how to do that, and how to be a mentor, and how to find a mentor. I think that's a great topic as well.
So that we the mentor lead for Women in BIM, she's just amazing. So I can link you with her as well if you want to have a chat to her, because she's been fantastic. Katia Veleva, her name is, and she's based out of London. But yeah, I can certainly link you with her.
That would be fantastic. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today on BIMThoughts. It's been very enlightening, very educational. I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to talk more about this. And I can't wait to learn more about mentoring and more about technology.